Welcome to my third interview of Season 4. In this interview, I'm joined by Jeff Pelizzaro. Jeff is a licensed physical therapist, TPI Level 2 expert, and a top 50 golf fitness professional by Golf Digest. Jeff and I talk about a lot of good stuff in this interview, from why you should train for golf, to fundamentals, to progressing in recovery, and so much more. We talk about Jeff's mission with 18 Strong and his 40-day forge, which you can find out more about on his website, 18strong.com. Jeff's podcast is certainly one of my favorites, and I recommend you check it out after this one. If you're a golfer looking to get stronger, gain speed, and perform better, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Let's start out by you telling everyone a little bit about yourself, how you got into training and specifically training for golf.
Sure. So my background's physical therapy. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. Went to school in Kansas City. And really, I grew up playing soccer. I didn't grow up playing golf at all. Really didn't start playing golf until I started working with golfers kind of in my mid to late 20s. And I had an opportunity after working in the physical therapy clinics for, I think, about 6 years to shift over and start working in the golf space. And was always intrigued just with kind of working with athletes, playing soccer, being an athlete myself. I always kind of wanted to do something along those lines with my schooling. And so had an opportunity to work with golfers, knowing that I could help, even though I didn't know much about the game and even really much about the swing. I knew that I knew the body and was able to help golfers with, things that they continue to deal with: pain, weakness, inflexibility, all of the limitations that really hinder a golfer. And so I knew that I was already working with some of them in a clinical setting and just wanted to take that to be a little bit more on a preventative basis. So I had the opportunity to kind of shift over unexpectedly. Started working with a golf fitness company here in St. Louis, and then eventually went off and did my own thing. Had made some really good connections with some of the local teaching pros, and was working with some of the country clubs and some of the higher level amateurs around town. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of a mixed bag of the golfers I was working with, from the country club golfer that's could be a 20 handicap to the number one amateur golfer in the area, as well as then eventually working with guys like Adam Long and Hayden Buckley and guys on the PGA Tour. So it was just kind of a twist in my life that I didn't really see coming. If you told me I was going to have a golf and fitness company 10 years ago, I would have told you were crazy. But but then eventually, once I started to work with golfers, I then went through the TPI certification, the fitness level 2, and then wanted to do something a little bit on a bigger scale than just me working with individual golfers, and really realized that there was an opportunity, or that I needed to kind of find some leverage to be able to become more of a resource for other fitness professionals like myself that were looking for information. Again, this was kind of back in, 2008 is when I kind of moved over into the golf space. 2012 is kind of when I started to do my own thing, and realized there's not that much information out there aside from the certification courses. And so I had started listening to these things called podcasts, and which nobody knew what that was back in those times, and was thinking to myself, like, that'd be kind of cool if I was able to, do a podcast and talk to some different individuals in the world of golf, in the fitness space. And initially it was all about, fitness for golf in the medical space. And it just kind of branched out from there. And I remember being on a golf trip with a bunch of my buddies from college. It was a Ryder Cup that we do every year. We still do it. We just had our 11th one. And I was talking to a good friend of mine, TJ. We were, after our round of golf that afternoon, we're sitting on the rooftop bar down in Columbia, Missouri. And I can remember him saying that he was really getting into golf. He had just joined a private club, or was close to joining a private club. And he was telling me, he's like, and I have started working out, and I've started doing, some workouts, and I really think it's helping my golf game. And I was like, that's awesome, man. Let me know what I can help with. And he started telling me what he was doing. And I can remember sitting there, we're sitting there having a Budweiser beer. And I'm like, dude, you're doing all the wrong things. Even though he was, he wanted to improve so much, and he saw the benefit of it, but he didn't know what to do. And it was right then that I was like, you know what, we're onto something, because there are so many guys out there like TJ, like all my other buddies, as I looked around the rooftop bar there, there's 20 of some of my best buddies. And like all of these guys now, some were very high level athletes. They're all kind of getting started in their careers, but most of them are going to drift into the world of golf for business reasons. A lot of them because they were athletic and competitive guys. They need a new athletic and competitive outlet, and golf is
Hmm.
naturally kind of the thing. And I was like, we could be a resource for a lot of individuals, and the way that we can do that, it's not about my knowledge necessarily. I've learned some things, but there's some really smart people out there that I could probably talk to, and that's really where 18 Strong came from, and where it has kind of developed to really talking to as many people as we can that are either people we want to hang out with and learn from that have experiences in the world of golf, or PGA Tour players or Corn Ferry Tour players or medical practitioners, doctors, physical therapists, fitness trainers, mental game coaches, a lot of the
Right.
people that you are kind of having on your show as well. And really that's
Right.
kind of where it started. And we've just kind of continued to go from there.
Yeah. I think I want to start with why train for golf. And it sounds like a really simple question. And I think a lot of people have these initial thoughts that come into their head, but especially for kind of the up and coming junior golfer that listens to my podcast, what are the real reasons and why they should train in the gym and off the golf course for better golf performance?
Well, I mean, there's so many benefits to it. And that's a great question, Carter. When I look at a young golfer that is starting to get pretty serious about golf becoming their sport, and we can talk about specialization and all of the things that come with that, and the pros and the cons there, which I'm a big believer that as a young athlete, you should really become an athlete first, and not necessarily dive so hard into one sport for several reasons of, first, burnout, second, just being an athlete allows you to adapt a lot better when it comes to all different situations. Being involved in team sports versus individual sports, there's so many good crossovers there that can benefit a golfer that they don't necessarily get if they're just always training on their own. But from the strength training standpoint and the training standpoint, as a young golfer, in the experience that I've had working with individuals here in the gym, let's say just kind of your typical high school golfer, early high school golfer, to be able to build a good, solid foundation of strength is one of the things that will last for a long, long time. If I've seen kids go in and start training and not particularly train the proper way, where they're really worried about form and postures, and it's all just about doing the workouts, getting as much work in as in a short period of time. It's kind of those workouts that just make you completely exhausted at the end, but don't really have a real emphasis on proper form, building true strength, building the foundation and
Hmm.
basics. So when I start with somebody, it really starts pretty simple: lunges, squats, deadlifts, pull ups, push ups, because those are the foundations. And this goes for any sport really. The better you get at those early on, the stronger eventually you're going to become if you continue with those good, proper training techniques, and you continue with consistency in your training. Strength is the ultimate when it comes to improving athletic performance. Because it impacts just about all of it, right? If you want to hit a ball further, getting stronger is going to help you hit a ball further. If you want to reduce injury, getting your muscles stronger and your joints able to move better and to be more efficient, that's going to help you in your golf game. It's going to help you be able to swing. It's going to help keep you from hurting yourself. And so, starting out at a young age, which is it's kind of hard to preach that to guys and girls that are 14, 15, 16 years old, because at your age, you know you feel kind of bulletproof, to be honest,
Yeah.
right? like
Yeah.
like you feel like those aren't really things that I need to worry about. But then talk to maybe a Division 1 golfer who's playing all the time, and now we're starting to see some of those guys and girls suffer from back issues
Mm.
and muscle strains and things that could possibly have been prevented if their
Yeah.
training and recovery was a little bit more dialed in from a younger age. And it just on the other side, it just builds discipline and habits too.
Hmm.
If the only thing you're doing is going out and practicing and hitting balls and going to the range and playing golf, um, that's great. And you're building up discipline in that sense. But I mean, look at the guys and girls on the PGA and LPGA tour. Look how much time and effort they're putting into the training.
Right.
That doesn't start just when you get onto the PGA Tour and LPGA Tour. That needs to start when you're young if you expect to get into Division 1 college or you get to that level of the pros.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I started my golf strength journey kind of recently within the last 3 or 4 months. And I learned my why the hard way because I had an injury earlier this year that was a completely based on overuse, and I was swinging too fast for my strength level. And so identifying those two things led me to now training for strength. And it's part of how I found your podcast. But how would you say you optimally train for strength? What are some of the key fundamentals of strength training, and what are some of the biggest misconceptions you see spread online?
Well, especially for golf, I just recently had an individual on, a coach by the name of Mike Boyle. I'm sure you probably listened to that episode, and he quoted another coach that he learned from. But what he said was, your sport isn't special, you just think it is when it comes to your training, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we get too caught up in the fact that we're doing golf training rather than strength training. And so the biggest mistake that I see when golfers initially kind of jump into a program and they think it's for their golf game is they start doing things that look kind of golfy, or as we would call golfish. A lot of rotation, a lot of stretching and flexibility exercises, especially in the population that you're talking to that's listening to this show right now. Flexibility probably isn't the biggest issue for the younger golfer, the junior golfer, right? The issue is going to be a little bit more having to build some stability to be able to harness exactly what you just said about your own injury. You were swinging so fast and trying to gain speed, but you didn't necessarily have the fundamentals and the base built yet. So you're putting a lot of extra stress on your body that your body just wasn't necessarily able to handle yet. And so where I start all of the junior golfers, and really where I start kind of everybody, is learning to control your body with tempo, posture, form in all the exercises. So if I have somebody in the gym and we're doing a split squat or a lunge or a squat or a pull up or a push up or a bench press or dumbbell press, I don't do too many bench presses. We'll work on not just, what's your setup, how should you be holding the weight, how should your posture look, but what's the tempo also on that lift. Let's just use a squat for example. Say you're holding dumbbells at your side and you're doing a squat. I want to make sure that you can control that weight on the way down. So typically I'll count out loud, 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1 on the way down to make sure that you're not just dropping into position and popping back up and letting momentum carry you. Because when you can handle the weight, when you can hold the weight and take it through the motion with poise, then that's when you're truly building strength. You're actually putting tension on the muscles that you're trying to work or through the movements that you're trying to move. And so when we're starting out, initially we'll do some higher volume, meaning, you're going to do some not high reps, but you're going to do somewhere between like 8 to 12 reps. And that's really more to kind of get you used to the motions. I often start with body weight, where you're doing the squats or the lunges or the push-ups, and you don't really have any weight added to that. Once an individual gets more comfortable with the movements and I see that they're starting to be able to handle a little bit of resistance, then we'll start to lower the reps, because the lower the reps, the more weight you can then add to the exercise. The more weight you can add to the exercise, that's when you start to build strength. So, that's where you start to get into conversations of, well, how many reps should I do? How many sets should I do? And something that many people don't talk about is how much rest should I take in between sets.
Mm-hmm.
So for somebody that has been training for a little while and you're able to start handling a little bit of weight and you're looking to build true strength, you're going to want to end up getting down to where your reps, so meaning like in one set, you do a certain number of reps. You're going to want that rep range to be probably around just 5, which sounds super low to most people. Um, but if you think about doing a dumbbell press, laying on your back and pressing a dumbbell upwards, you can lift a lot more weight if you're only doing 5 of them than if you're doing 15 of them. And so we're going to skew more towards lifting heavier weight with less repetitions and then taking a long rest in between the next exercise, because then you want your body to kind of recover and you want to come back to the next set where you can again lift that heavier weight for those 5 reps in good form. And then ultimately it all really boils down to you having control over the weights means you have control over your body, which means you know how to handle your body in all different movements, positions, balance. And that's what really ends up helping with your golf swing, is you having more awareness of being able to control your body. So if you're working on something with your golf coach and you haven't trained at all and you don't have a whole lot of body awareness, it's going to be harder for you to do whatever the drill is that you're trying to do, or to maybe change your posture or change your path. Or but if you're comfortable in the gym and you're really good with knowing where your body is and how to move it and how to control it and how to balance it, you're going to be that much more proficient at being able to then take that to the lesson and do what your coach is wanting you to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important to, track your improvement in anything you do, whether it's golf, in the gym, whatever. How do you, or what benchmarks do you look at to track your progression in the gym? Is it purely weight lifted, or, what are some measurable benchmarks you use?
Well, everybody that I have come in person, we take them through an initial evaluation. So we're looking
Hmm.
at, we're kind of screening different motions, looking at their hip rotation, looking at their trunk rotation. We'll even do, depending on the person, we'll do some power tests where we're, throwing a medicine ball. Uh, there's a couple different tests that we would do. And anybody that's been through a TPI, Tyler's Performance Institute screen, or has gone to a TPI certified coach, they've probably gone through a screen that has some of those components. And then I will take people through just the basics of some of those exercises that we talked about. Can you do a split squat? Can you do a regular push up? Can you do a pull up? Or if you can't do a pull up, how long can you hold yourself in kind of that pull up or that chin hang position? And so we'll have all of that information on day one, and we'll look at those things. And then really, when I'm working individually here in person, I'm constantly kind of assessing and making sure that we know, I'm watching that those motions are getting better. Or if we found something where somebody's limited, I'm then giving them homework to work on, maybe it's their hip mobility, or maybe it's their core strength, whatever that might be. And then we'll retest periodically. But even more than that is just kind of that constant assessment of watching that person through the gym. But if you're somebody at home, if you're a junior golfer, the easiest way to do it, just like you said, is just to track your stuff, track your workouts. And that's not done enough in the general population, where literally I'm sitting here right next to you. I just finished my workout. I have a spreadsheet on my clipboard, that I printed out, and I track every rep or every set that I do. I I write it down. I'm old school. I still like to print out the Excel spreadsheets. Even though
Yeah.
we have our app here at 18 Strong with all of our videos and workouts and everything, I still prefer to print out my sheet, and I write down if I'm doing if I'm doing 5 sets and I'm doing, 5 reps or whatever, I'll write down for every set what was the weight that I did for that set. And so I'll have 5 numbers there. And maybe that number is the same across the board, but I always try to push a little bit more, especially from week to week. And if you don't have that to look at from last week, like, just let's just say you're doing bicep curls.
Right.
If this week you do bicep curls at 15 pounds, and next week you don't have anything to look back and say, what did I do last week? You'll be like, I think it was 15. I'll just stick with 15. And here you might go out 6 months and maybe you go up to 20 pounds because you never really remembered how much you pushed yourself. And so you don't know where to start your first set. So it's really important to just have a plan written out and have the ability to track what the weights are or how many reps did you do, and just have something to look back on and to compare with and say, did I get better this week compared to last week?
When you're tracking your stuff like that, and you're tracking weights and you want to progressively add more and more weight. When do you know it's time for you to add weight? Is that something you try and just see how it goes, or is there a certain amount of time after you up your weight before you add more? How do you determine when to add more?
That's a great question. So typically, when writing out a program, if we're going for, let's just say, use the fives again. So if we're going to do 5 sets of five,
Hmm.
typically I'll put on a client's sheet or even on my sheet five. I'm sorry, 3 to 5 reps. I'll give a little bit of a rep range,
Hmm.
and what you want to do is let that rep range dictate what the amount of resistance is.
Okay.
So, and it's, when you get into some exercises that are more body weight, that becomes a little bit different. But again, just for simplicity, using the dumbbell press. If I'm saying and let's even go a little higher with the rep range, let's say 8 to 10 reps. If I have a weight that I can do, that I do, and I'm supposed to do 8 to 10 reps, and I get to 10 and I feel like, you know what, I could probably do 4 or 5 more of those, then I won't do 4 or 5 more in that set. What I'll do is I'll stop at 10, but the next set, I know that I'm going to go up in weight.
Okay.
So if I lifted 40 pounds for that set, the next set I'll try 45. And if I get to 10 again, I still feel like, you know what, I could probably do a little bit more. I'll bump it up again. And so on my tracking sheet, I'll have written down 40 for the first set, 45 for the second set, 50 for the third set. But let's say on the third set, I'm only able to get 6 reps. I'll write down 50 and I'll even put 6 reps. And then I'll go back to either 45, or maybe if I have the ability to go to 47, then I'll back it down. So if I'm using that rep range of 8 to 10, as long as I get 8 reps with good form, that's
Hmm.
crucial, with good
Right.
form, proper form through full range of motion, then I consider that a decent weight. So on that set, I got 8 of them. I'm good. I'll stay with that weight. If I do the next set, I might have to go down. Or if I got to 8 and I was like, holy crap, that was hard as can be. There's no way I'm getting 8 next set. Then I'll maybe drop it down a little bit again too. So use that range. So I'll have clients come in, or I'll see people in the gym, and they'll just grab the same weight, and they're doing 3 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 10, and they'll just end up doing like 20 reps. And I'm like, why did you do that? Well, it's too light.
Yeah.
Well, get a heavier weight. Don't just keep adding reps, because
Yeah.
that goes back to our conversation earlier. You want to use the heavier weight, has a certain stimulus on the body to build strength. If you just
Hmm.
keep doing more reps, you're not necessarily building strength, you're building endurance.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So something else I've encountered as just starting out with all this strength work is muscle imbalances, certain muscles being significantly stronger than others. Are there any certain muscle groups you see in golfers that, are much weaker than the others or should be stronger and they're not?
Well, yes, for golfers, but I think just for most people in general these days,
Okay.
we're very front side dominant. So upper body wise, our chest, our shoulders tend to be kind of like rounded in and a little bit tighter, and our upper back and shoulder muscles are typically a little bit weaker, or like even just posturally. Think of
Hmm.
how often we're on computers, phones. Everything that we do is so much in front of us that we naturally kind of like crouch forward,
Yeah.
almost get into that fetal position a little bit, forward head. So really anything that kind of opens us up, that pulls us back. And when you're sitting, for everybody that's listening to this or watching this, if you have the video, anytime you can kind of sit up and kind of pull your shoulders back and extend backwards, you'll feel those upper back muscles working a little bit, maybe even feel the lower back muscles work a little bit. Those
Hmm.
are the muscles that really need some attention, because we sit in a position where they're elongated for most of the day. And so to be able to work on our posture really is more of a habitual thing than just
Hmm.
doing exercises to strengthen. But also, we need to strengthen those muscles to be really strong for physical activities that we do, like a golf swing, where we have to try to maintain our posture against other forces, like a rotational force. It's really
Yeah.
easy to kind of get rounded out in a golf swing or golf posture. So working on, especially the upper back, being able to kind of pinch the shoulder blades down and back a little bit and kind of pop your chest up. Think of Rory McIlroy standing over a golf ball. I mean, it's just a pretty picture. Then
Hmm.
superimpose next to him, and this is a little The junior
Yeah.
golfer is typically a little better looking than a lot of the guys that we're talking to typically, which is kind of the 30 to 60-year olds.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's night and day. You post up a picture of your typical 30 to 60-year-old golfer, and they're rounded over and they're hunched over, and you look at them next to Rory McIlroy. But you just do a couple of simple things of just getting them to pull their shoulders back and stick their chest out a little bit, and they see the difference there. The
Yeah.
other is all of the lower body muscles. We
Really.
especially guys. And this, I don't know if your audience is more female or male, but especially the young guys, we tend, and I remember this in high school when I was in high school and college. There's a bit of a vanity play when it comes to the working out piece, and it's a little bit more about the upper body, the arms,
Mm.
the guns, the shoulders, the chest, right? So rarely are they doing a lot of upper back or back work, but very neglected is the lower body. So doing any kind of squats, lunges, and deadlifts. Those are the three big. Any kind of squat, lunge, deadlift. I'm not a huge barbell back squat guy. I think that there's there's a lot of bad things that can happen with a barbell on your back as far as your low back is concerned, and especially with
Uh-huh.
golfers. As much as we rotate, I think that there's better and smarter ways to just alleviate some of that stress. But getting your lower body very strong, especially
Hmm.
with some unilateral exercises, and that would be like squats and lunges and even single leg deadlifts. Um,
Yeah.
that's the engine in your golf swing. Your lower body is the engine in your golf swing, and the stronger and more explosive you can get your lower body, and then your core is what then helps connect that to the upper body. So all of it's important, but we tend to neglect the lower body, especially the glutes, um, which are really kind of a big driver of the hips and being able to rotate, but being able to use
Hmm.
the ground to exhibit some power and speed and explosiveness is huge.
Yeah. So you mentioned some exercises for the lower body, but what are some of your favorite exercises for the mid and upper back?
So, well, first of all, I think that everyone should be able to or should work towards doing a full pull up. Pull ups are one of the greatest, not just back and shoulder exercises. Because you're naturally just kind of pulling backwards, so you're working the shoulder blades, but it's a incredible core exercise too. You have to have a strong core to be able to do a
Mm.
good solid pull up. So doing pull ups are some of my favorites. Working on the rotator cuff is also a big deal, and that can be several different things. Very simple is kind of your elbow up to a 90-degree angle out at your side with a dumbbell and kind of like rotating up towards your ear. Just if you're watching the video, you can see kind of just rotating your hand up towards your ear, but that's going to work the whole shoulder complex as
Hmm.
well. And then as far as your midsection, like your core and trunk, anything plank related is really really a top priority. Your trunk, think of your lower back. So anything below your rib cage down to your pelvis
Hmm.
is is really meant to be more stable than rotary. All your rotation really should happen from your hips, from your hip sockets, as well as kind of your upper torso. So like
Hmm.
rib cage.
Yeah.
Your low back is meant to flex forward and backwards. Your low back is not meant to rotate side to side
Okay.
or in a rotary fashion. So the stronger we can get the trunk with things like planks, side planks, bird dogs, if you know what those are, that's
Yeah.
going to build the ability for your core to stay static
Okay.
while other forces are happening. Those other forces are going to be you swinging a golf club around. But
Yeah.
if you don't have stability there in your trunk, then your low back is often going to take up some of that stress, and that's why a lot of golfers have issues with their back. It's not necessarily because they have. It's not necessarily the back that's the cause. It's the
Hmm.
fact that something else is supposed to be rotating, but it's
Yeah.
not, and our core is not working hard enough to stabilize, and so then your lower back, your spine starts to feel that extra stress and pressure.
That makes a lot of sense. So are there any, we talked about some of the really good lifts. Are there any certain kinds of lifts that you would discourage golfers from doing?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. Again, a lot of it depends on um, your training level,
Yeah.
if you have a coach or not. If you're trying to do some of this stuff on your own, I would stay away from any kind of Olympic lifting, anything, with a barbell that's going to be pretty technical, just because it's easy to go online and find an instructional video on, doing a clean and jerk, or, doing some of the heavier Olympic, more explosive lifts, which can be great. But I've never really used them because I've never been trained properly in coaching them or doing them myself. And I
Yeah.
think that there's ways for you to find explosiveness in other exercises like medicine ball throws, even doing some sorts of sprints, some
Yeah.
rotational stuff, but without putting yourself at risk for injury. So, there's a lot of golfers that I have come across over the years that have decided they wanted to get back in shape, and they started going to like CrossFit. And so they're doing these super heavy deadlifts.
Yeah.
They're doing these, tons of kettlebell swings. They're doing a lot of Olympic style lifting. Not that kettlebell is Olympic style lifting, but they're
Yeah.
doing a lot of these kind of lifts at very high repetitions with very little instruction, and not good technique, and then they end up getting hurt, and then that's when they come see me or go to the doctor. I've got a very
Yeah.
good friend here in St. Louis. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and he said, this fad of CrossFit has been one of the best things for my business, because so many people have gotten hurt. And I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not knocking CrossFit, because I think CrossFit has also done a great job of kind of getting people to be unafraid of doing some barbell stuff, and getting people
Right.
off their butt and into the gym. But if your goal is to be a high level junior, collegiate, and then professional golfer, you need to think about what are the risks, what are the rewards, and I don't think that the reward outweighs the risk of doing some of those, super heavy or very technical lifts if you don't have that instruction.
Yeah. So, with building strength and getting stronger, how closely is gaining muscle mass and gaining strength related? Do they go kind of hand in hand, or could you gain a lot of strength without gaining a lot of muscle mass? I think a lot of people look at someone like Bryson who put on, 40, 60 pounds and saw a lot of speed and kind of associate gaining weight with more strength and power. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a great question, because strength and then what we would call hypertrophy, or gaining muscle,
Hmm.
they they are related, but they are different. So if you really want to gain muscle,
Hmm.
you have to have a program and a diet that is
Yeah.
tailored towards gaining muscle. And that's going to require a lot more volume. So you're not going to be lifting as much weight, but you're going to be doing a lot more reps, because the goal is really to put the tension in the muscles and to really break them down where they have to regenerate, and that's how they're going to get bigger. But you also
Yeah.
have to really account for the caloric needs in your diet. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm I'm 5'9", 5'10" with shoes on, and I'm 161 pounds right now. I've been trying to get more muscle mass for probably 30 years now, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy to do. So people see what Bryson did. They have no idea how hard it is to gain that much muscle. And even, Bryson at his peak there, he was not a very low body fat percentage. So
Right.
there's a lot of muscle and fat that's gained when you go in a program like that, but that's to be expected. Um, so you have to really eat a lot, which is harder than most people think, if you're going to do it in a clean and healthy way. You
Yeah.
don't want to just go run through McDonald's every day to get those calories, because
Right.
eventually that'll wreak havoc. But as far as building strength, you can build strength without building up a bunch of muscle. And that goes back to our talk about doing lower reps with
Hmm.
heavier weight. And that's where you really get in the nitty gritty of, designing a program and having a real plan. So if you think that you're just going to be able to go in the gym and wing it, and, do some curls, or today I'm going to do some chest presses, and maybe some pull downs, and I'm going to go do some squats. You can't just wing it and really hit your targets.
Yeah.
And I would say that one of the keys that I didn't even really realize until I had the opportunity to start working around some real, very, very talented and smart strength coaches, is you really have to kind of pick your direction if you want to get good or if you want to reach a goal in one of these. If you feel like you need to gain more muscle, then start there and have somebody help you go along those lines and kind of,
Yeah.
build out towards working towards that. If you feel like you need more strength, which for most golfers, um, I will typically start a newer golfer with building a little bit of muscle first,
Okay.
and then kind of tearing towards building more strength as they get a little bit more comfortable with the weights. They start to get a little bit more muscle mass,
Yeah.
and then get a little bit more towards strength. And if you're looking at just a yearly plan of kind of an off season plan, a lot of times it'll start with the muscle building, the hypertrophy piece, then move a little bit more towards the strength and start working on some lower reps, heavier weight, and then getting closer to season, moving in more towards what we would call a little bit of power and speed. The difference between training for strength and the power and speed phase is you're not necessarily trying to go as heavy, you're trying to go fast.
Okay.
You're and for power and speed, it's even less repetition. So maybe you're doing 3 or 4 reps instead of 5 or whatever, because your goal is simply to grab something and move it as fast as possible. So
Yeah.
if you're doing, some sort of a drill, you're gonna, like a medicine ball throw, you're gonna throw it as fast as you can. You're not gonna do it 20 times. You're gonna grab it and maybe throw it 3 or 4 times, but with as much force and power as you can. And a great way to think of training for muscle mass versus training for strength. I think it was Jeff Cavalier from Athlean X that I heard say this. But in your intent of your exercises, if your goal is for muscle mass and hypertrophy, you want to, during your exercise, you want to think about challenging the specific muscles. So you're actually kind of thinking of the muscles that are working. So in a dumbbell
Yeah.
press, you're thinking of the chest, you're thinking of the
Right.
shoulders, and you're trying to feel the challenge in those muscles. When you're training for strength, you're challenging the movement. So it doesn't matter how you get it there, you're trying to move that weight and as much weight as possible through that movement, not necessarily trying to feel the muscles that are doing it.
Yeah. Is there a benchmark you look at for people who, if you look at somebody and you say they need to gain muscle versus just strength based on, age, height, current weight? Is there a certain level you look at where you're like, yeah, they probably need to gain more muscle than strength? Or is it kind of just person to person?
It's definitely more person to person, for me, because I see such a variety of people on a regular basis. I
Hmm.
in next week I'll have a 16-year-old high level female golfer coming in, and then I also work with. I just had in yesterday a gentleman who is 74 years old,
Yeah.
but he's still plays very high level golf. He played in the
Right.
Masters 5 times, and can
Wow.
still, shot a he shot a 69 at Pine Valley this year. So
Yeah.
they're gonna require very different things. He's gonna need a lot more and it also depends on what their goals are too, right? So he's gonna need a lot more of just some mobility stuff.
Hmm.
And it's definitely not all about his golf game when we're working on his training. It's about, living every day, being able to move, being able to get up and down from the floor with his
Right.
grandkids. Now, this young girl that's going to come in, it's going to be more about getting her prepared to play higher level golf. So many of
Yeah.
the people listening to this show are going to be more in that category, where for her, I'm going to look at, okay, is your are you moving pretty well? Are you pretty flexible? And I'm going to guess that, most female golfers are going to be pretty flexible. There's not going to be a
Yeah.
whole lot of restriction in their movement. But I'm going to guess that if I take her through some of the strength tests or even the body weight strength tests, push up, pull up,
Hmm.
split squat, I'm going to see that she's going to be a little bit wobbly and maybe not very steady in those exercise or in those tests. So I know right out of the gate we're going to need to work on some strength with her. Let's say I have let's say you come into the gym and, you do pretty well on the body weight stuff. You can do your pull up,
Hmm.
you can do your push up, you can do a split squat, no problem. And then we do some of those medicine ball tests, and I see, hey Carter, on your sit up and throw test, you're a little bit lower than where we want you to be. So that tells me that we can probably that's a power test primarily,
Yeah.
but what that also is telling me is, well, hey, maybe he needs to work on some strength there too. And so that's when we'll kind of look at some strength related things too. So if you're going to be dialing it in, and you're going to see a coach, that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see when it comes to your programming is, where is this person lacking? Does Carter need more hip rotation, or is he good there and he just needs to work on his pushing and pulling strength? Or
Yeah.
is his pushing strength outdoing his pulling strength? So do we need to program in some more pull-ups and rows and exercises that are going to strengthen the backside of the body?
Yeah. So, we talked about it a little bit earlier with strength, power, and speed training. And my understanding up to this point, talking to a few other golf trainers, is strength is directly related to power, and power is directly related to speed. Do you agree with that? And do you train in that way?
Yeah. So power is the result of both of those.
Okay.
So, um, you know, the stronger you are and the faster you are, the more power you're going to have. So, think of power as being kind of a derivative of having those two. So you
Yeah.
could take somebody super strong. Let's say you can lift, you can bench press, you can deadlift, and you can squat a bunch of weight. But then you take that person out to the range, and they're swinging at 85, 90 miles an hour, and you're thinking like, dude, this person is strong as an ox.
Yeah.
Well, then you know that person just doesn't have the speed yet. they're
Right.
they're strong as can be. We don't need to go get them stronger. What we need to do is work on drills that make them faster. Now, if you take somebody that already has some speed, maybe they're a sprinter, maybe they're a pole vaulter, maybe they're a shot putter. Let's not take a shot putter. Usually they're going to be pretty strong too.
Yeah.
But somebody like that, where you do some of these tests, and you're like, man, you can tell this person has that speed to them. Now, if we get them stronger on top of that, that's going to
Right.
just totally improve their ability to produce power. So they do go hand in hand. I find that, and where I start typically, because it's an easier starting place too, is to start building strength in most individuals. I
Hmm.
haven't necessarily found the person that is too strong yet, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that where my background really helps is figuring out, well, maybe they're strong in one area, but where are they not strong? And how can we balance that out and bring those two to be a little bit more even? And then we can build in some strength and speed stuff, or some speed stuff, where that's medicine ball throws, or that's maybe the super speed clubs, or the stack system, or something along those lines, box jumps, but with intent. Doing
Right.
explosive things with intent, not just doing sprints and jumps and bounding without any real thought behind it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And for speed training, of course, when most golfers think of gym stuff, they think of speed because that's becoming bigger and bigger in the game. And so because of that, there are a lot of products that claim to help you, increase your swing speed, whether it be speed sticks, stack system, all those sorts of things. Are there any products like that that you use or recommend for helping transition that strength into actual swing speed?
I've used the super speed clubs a lot over the years. We've known those guys since they came up with that product, really, and that was the first one on the market to really break into that whole overspeed, underspeed, or overweight, underweight kind of training. I just recently was introduced to the stack system, and
Hmm.
same principles. That one looks like it has a very intuitive interface as far as
Yeah.
the app is concerned. I have a guy that brought his in here recently, and I was watching him do it. So that one looks very legit. It's awesome. In fact, Sasha McKenzie, the creator of that, we're hoping to have him on the show pretty soon to talk more about it, because
Yeah.
what I really liked about it is it does an assessment on you, and it tells you
Hmm.
what weights to use. It tells you what repetitions to do, and it also tells you how long to rest, because the rest, when you're doing speed training, the rest is super super important. Speed training is very much a neurological thing. And so as you're swinging as fast as you can, your central nervous system, it wears down pretty quickly when you do that. That's why if I was to tell you, Carter, go swing this driver 40 times as fast as you can, your first 5 swings will be so much faster than your last 5 swings. And it's because it's not that you're not strong enough to keep swinging it fast, it's your neurological system starts to wear down.
Yeah.
And so one of my concerns with some of the different products out there is just the amount of volume of swings that they have you doing in one session and not taking enough rest breaks. So, there were times when and super speed sticks were one of the program, like their initial programs. I think they've started to tailor them differently. But you were doing like 50 or 70 swings in this short
Yeah.
period of time. And that's just so much that, again, when you're doing something that many times, that's, let's face it, it's a pretty technical move still, even though you're
Right.
just swinging and ripping. Is The golf swing is pretty technical and it's hard on the body.
Right.
If you're doing it that many times and you're trying to do it fast, there is a possibility of first getting hurt,
Yeah.
or your form breaking down. And that's why I like this one, because it just told you, like, okay, now you have to rest, and it has a timer that counts down your rest. We On every sheet that I have for my in-person clients, I put like how much you're supposed to rest in between each exercise,
Hmm.
because that's your body's ability to recover and restore in between exercises or swings. And that's a really important piece that you never hear
Yeah.
anybody talking about, that you have to rest in order to then have the energy to put forth your max effort on that next swing or that next rep, because max effort is really where the real gains happen.
Right. And how much strength training do you, or not strength, speed training do you recommend somebody do in conjunction with their strength training?
if if we're just talking about like the clubs, super speed, ripstick,
Hmm.
stack system, I think twice a week is enough.
Okay.
I think if you go above that and you're doing, it depends on what your training schedule looks like as well. Uh, I have some of my golfers doing 4 days a week. Oftentimes I'm personally doing 5 days of strength training myself. So to do more than 2 days of speed training is going to be a little too much on the system. And I think then you start to um, outweigh the benefits by possible overtraining, or if you're doing it and your body's tired, you can't get faster when you're tired. So you have
Yeah.
to be pretty specific and diligent with when are you doing that training too. So don't ever do your super speed clubs or the stack system. Don't ever do that after your workout, because your body's going to be tired. If you're tired, you can't go faster than you normally would. So
Yeah.
if you're doing it, do that, get nice and warmed up, get your body loose and moving. Do that before you do your strength training, because that's going to allow you to swing at your max speeds with your max effort. And then that's not really going to impact your weight training or your resistance training. But if you do it the other way around, it will impact you.
Yeah. And that leads in kind of to my next question, which, moving away a little bit from strength, uh, endurance. Endurance isn't that big of a deal for most golfers, but for somebody like the junior or collegiate player, like let's take the junior player for example. If you go and play the US Junior Amateur and you make it all the way through and you win, you play over 200 holes of golf in the span of a week. And you're walking 6-7 miles sometimes on a course, sometimes it's really hilly. How do you, in the gym and on the golf course, develop that endurance to make sure your body is still functioning at a very high level on that 205th hole?
Yeah, that's another really great question, because I think that is not as much of a concern as people think it is when it comes to what somebody's doing in the gym. I would rather you concentrate on building your strength,
Hmm.
so that every swing that you have the maximum amount of impact that you can out of that swing. And even for something as simple as you're walking the course, the stronger you are when you're walking, you'll be able to exhibit more force through every step. So your steps will be a little bit more efficient. Your body will be a little bit more efficient. So as far as from the strength training standpoint, endurance is kind of the last thing that I worry about when it comes to a golfer, because that will take care of itself if they're doing the other kind of training properly.
Right.
Now, what does impact the endurance level of a golfer, and especially junior golfers, is nutrition and sleep and hydration. What you're putting in your body has a big impact. And there are many times where, at a golf event or whatever, you'll see like the snack table or whatever that might be provided, or even what people are doing in between rounds. And it's Gatorades and it's chips and it's, maybe some sugary treats or, you know, um, pastries or whatever they might have laid out, granola bars, where if you're not putting in the right fuel, that's going to cause some of those ups and downs in your insulin, your sugar levels, and your blood sugar
Yeah.
levels, and that's going to impact your energy. Um, what time are you going to bed that night? Doing all of the right things there. Hydration is super key. So not just drinking water, but do you have something on the course that has some electrolytes in it
Yeah.
that are going to help you kind of rejuvenate, especially if it's super hot out? You're going to be getting rid of more than just water out of your system. You're getting rid of salts and other minerals. So you need something else in there. Um, so to take care of those things, the hydration, the sleep, and the nutrition, I think is probably going to really be a huge role player in the endurance level. Again, mind you, if you did the right stuff, strength training and doing your speed training, th- as far as walking the course, that will be taken care of with those other things. But if you
Yeah.
don't have your nutrition and your hydration and your sleep on point, that's going to really end up messing with you in the endurance factor.
Yeah. And you mentioned Gatorade being really sugary, which we all know it is. What other electrolyte supplement do you recommend somebody use?
So one that we're affiliated with on our show is called Live Pure, and that
Okay.
was started by or in conjunction with Dr. Troy Van Biesen. He's the chiropractor that works with Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth, and Zach Johnson, and really
Hmm.
all of the top players. So that one's formulated a lot cleaner, and that's just like mixed, little packets you rip off, you dump
Yeah.
into your water bottle or whatever. I've also used the Noon tablets,
Okay.
NUUN. You can typically find those at like Whole Foods or your local grocery store, Target. And those are nice because they're just little tablets, almost like an Alka-Seltzer that you just plop into your water, and then that'll just kind of diffuse into the water. That's a great one. But there's some other ones. BioSteel. We use Designs for Health for a lot of our supplements and vitamins and things like that. So there's some good ones out there. But yeah, any of the sports drinks that are in the coolers at the gas station aren't typically the best. But
Yeah.
but then also, if you're in a pinch, I'd rather you have a little bit of Gatorade, just mix it with some water or something if you don't have anything with you, rather than
Yeah.
just having water on a super hot day, or
Right.
any kind of a situation like that where you might be in trouble if you don't have it.
Yeah, I'm all too aware of the heat being in the southeast and some of those summer tournaments. It gets hot.
Oh yeah.
I want to talk about balancing training and playing because again, for some more recreational golfers, it's not as big of a deal as it is for junior and collegiate players, especially junior golfers. They play most of the year. Depends on where you live, but the summer, June, July, are very concentrated with a lot of tournaments for junior golf. And how do you maintain your gym work that you've done and maybe even continue to progress while you're playing, probably at least 7 rounds of golf a week?
So that's where I would say don't necessarily worry about progressing. Worry
Okay.
about trying to maintain, or really worry about minimizing loss, because you can't do it all, right? And you
Yeah.
have to figure out what are your priorities. Your priorities during season, during highly competitive times, is your golf. So
Right.
what I would suggest is maybe try to get in once or twice a week some strength training, again, maybe this is now you're just doing 3 sets of 5 where you're still doing a little bit of decent weight on some of these different lifts, and just stick to the basics. So the basics that we talk about all the time are push and pull, and that would be more upper body. So think like
Hmm.
chest press, and a pull would be a row or a pull up, or a push would also be like a push up. So think push, pull, and then squats,
Yeah.
lunges, hinges. So hinging being like a deadlift, and then some sort of rotational type exercise, and working on your, just kind of some core strength.
Yeah.
If you do those a couple times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, and you hit those main ones with, 3 sets of maybe 5 reps with some decent weight, you I don't want you to feel like you're super tired after your workouts. I don't want you to feel like you're gassed out after your workouts. I want you to feel like you just got some work done, but it's not going to rob your strength and endurance out on the golf course, because
Yeah.
again, that's your A1 top priority at that time. Then I would also, maybe have some sort of a little mobility routine that you can do kind of post round or in the
Hmm.
evenings after you've played, just to make sure that everything's moving well, and you're kind of getting the blood flow through the system and kind of flushing out any toxins. But don't think of your competitive season as the time where you need to hit it hard in the gym too. When we're talking and working with any kind of high level player like a Hayden Buckley, or when I worked with Adam Long back a few years ago, it wasn't about getting their main strength training workouts done during the week. It's like, what
Yeah.
can you do that week of competition that's going to make you feel good and ready to play, but without draining you for your rounds of golf.
Yeah. And we've talked about it a little bit already with nutrition, sleep, and electrolytes, but what other things do you recommend people do after exercise or after a golf round to help them recover, as far as from a physical standpoint?
So a couple of funny things that people wouldn't necessarily think about, is, and I really just kind of learned about the importance of this one recently, is, and this might even be after your round of golf, but also after a workout, is taking time to just like sit and chill out and breathe, and take some nice, good, deep breaths in through your nose, out through your nose. There's a great book, if you haven't heard of it yet, by a guy named James Nestor, called Breath, and
Okay.
it talks about the importance of breathing, but also breathing through our nose. And there's so much science behind it. I'm not going to go on that tangent today,
Yeah.
but really, as far as like your nervous system, slowing down your breathing, think of like meditative states, and doing meditation, it just kind of calms your nervous system. So let's say
Yeah.
you had a really highly competitive round. You have played way more stressful golf than I have. I've never played competitively except for my Ryder Cups with my buddies, right?
Yeah.
And so, but when you get done with the round, I bet sometimes you're just mentally fried.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, aside from just the physical piece of it, it's taking some time to chill out, after you turn your scorecard in or whatever, and just like, go sit under a tree and like take some deep breaths, and just try to like forget about the round, or just kind of let things kind of simmer down. There's a big benefit there when it comes to your nervous system. And then the other one that I said was kind of funny, and I have an episode on the podcast coming out next week on this, is, and maybe you won't necessarily do this at the golf course, but maybe when you get home, is, you would call it grounding or earthing, like getting your skin on the earth, the grass, because there's a lot of electrical properties in the earth itself that helps kind of
Yeah.
regulate. It's almost like the earth is a big battery that helps charge our system. But we're always in shoes. You're in your golf shoes, you're in your tennis shoes, and so rarely
Right.
do we actually touch the earth. And so there's a lot of science behind the anti-inflammatory effects of just literally getting your skin on the ground. Or if, like I said, if you went and sat down and were just kind of chilling out and breathing after a round, even sitting on the ground like that would be
Yeah.
a great thing to do. I mean, just think about sitting on the beach or sitting out in the park or having your feet in the grass. Like it's usually a pretty relaxed time, and part of that is because of this whole electric property of the earth, kind of just almost like recharging us a little bit.
Yeah. That's interesting. What are your thoughts on ice baths? I see a lot of tour players, posting after a round doing them. I personally haven't tried it, but I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
So there's a lot to cold therapy. I I haven't done a whole lot of the ice plunge, ice baths, but I've been learning and reading a little bit more about that lately. I
Hmm.
used to do them in college after our 3-day tryouts after soccer,
Yeah.
and it was amazing for the soreness factor and helping to reduce soreness. But there's a lot of studies showing that there's a lot of great things that come from the cold and ice regarding immunity, regarding metabolism. One thing that I did learn just recently is that you really shouldn't do a cold plunge though after a strength training or hypertrophy session, because
Okay.
it negates some of the things that you're trying to do physiologically in your body. So if you're doing it, do it separate, do it away from, like, do it in the morning time
Yeah.
or before your workouts, but don't do it right afterwards. I don't know the specific details on why. There's a great podcast called the Huberman Lab that
Okay.
he's a neuroscientist from, I think, maybe Stanford, and he goes into he does a deep, you'll love it, he does a deep dive on so many physical and training things that
Yeah.
but he talks about that. But I am a big fan of cold therapy. I do cold showers every single morning. I think just from an alertness standpoint,
Yeah.
and kind of changing your state, but also from a willpower standpoint. I'm a big believer that we have to put ourselves in positions where to make ourselves tougher,
Mm.
to kind of challenge ourselves mentally and
Hmm.
physically, because that just benefits us in all areas of life. And so a cold shower is one of those things that you never ever really want to do, but once you do it, it not only energizes you physiologically, but mentally, being able to get over that hurdle of doing something you don't want to do is a big confidence builder.
Yeah. So I want to conclude by talking about your 18 Strong app. So what is it? How did you develop it, and how can it help the people who are listening to this episode?
Yeah. So, we started building out some programs. Just like I said before, I'm a spreadsheet and paper guy. And
Hmm.
so we started out with what we call our Golf Body Blueprint program, which is an 8-week training program. And we built it out pretty much for any golfer, where you can adjust it based on the videos that we put together. If there's a
Yeah.
certain exercise, I show some different ways to do it. So it's applicable to all levels of golfers. Um, but when we first built that out, we just put it together in PDFs, and made it a very easy to follow program with videos. But then we realized that some people wanted a little bit more of an app based program, and so what we did was we took those initial programs and we have then transferred those over into the app. So you still have a couple, we've got our Golf Body Blueprint, we've got what we call our Activate program, our Anywhere program, which is one that has very little equipment needed, you can kind
Hmm.
of do it anywhere. So we've got all of these different 4-week or 8-week programs in there. And then we also, every single month, we put in a new program just to kind of keep things fresh for somebody
Yeah.
that just wants to have something. You know, so many times it's just like, I don't know what to do. And so we wanted to give our golfers the ability to just go in and say, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so we have everything laid out. We've talked about all the different training principles and reps and things like that in this podcast. And so that's a lot for somebody to think about if they're trying to put this stuff together themselves, right? So
Yeah.
we wanted to try to make it as easy as possible for people, because we know people don't have a lot of time. They don't have the background in training. So every program that we've developed and designed was me literally sitting down, or me and my buddy Tony, who's one of the best strength coaches in the world,
Hmm.
and figuring out, like, what do we really want them to get out of this program? What does the golfer need?
Yeah.
Not just a generalized strength training program, but we have the golfer in mind for all of this, based on the mobility, the strength, the speed, those kinds of properties in these programs. So it's super easy. Anybody that wants to check it out, they can just go to 18strong.com, and we do have a 7-day free trial. So you can go in, check it out, and see if you like it. So, just kind of check around the different programs. I would recommend starting with either the Golf Body Blueprint or the Golf Body Blueprint Activate program. There's also a full blown warm up program in there, the golfer's warm up blueprint. So there's all kinds of things in there, but it just kind of makes it
Yeah.
easy to have on hand.
Yeah. And then another program you do, the 40-day Forge. Tell my listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the 40-day forge is really what we were talking about before, where, I'm a big believer that putting yourselves in situations where you're challenging yourself,
Hmm.
because so much of it boils down to our self-confidence. I mean, think about it. When you're on the golf course and you feel confident, you tend to just play better, right? If you
Mm,
step up to the ball, I put in the hard work, I've done my training, I put in my practice, I'm standing here with good posture, I'm ready to go. You tend to play better when you're in. That's kind of when you get in the zone, right?
hmm.
Well, the 40-day forge is something that I kind of had started doing on my own over the past several years, and then last year we made it kind of an official thing with 18 Strong. It's 40 days, and we're starting it up again. It's kind of an evergreen thing. So somebody could go to the 40-day forge. I'm sorry, they can go to 18strong.com/the forge, and they
Hmm.
can find all the details. Uh, so but basically it's a program where we're going to start up and do a large group of people doing this starting beginning of January, and it's 40 days. There's 7 daily tasks that you have to complete every single day, and it has to do with your fitness, your diet, doing some golf swings, cold showers. Uh, there's several different ones in there, and the whole
Yeah.
thing is being perfect for those 40 days. And if you miss one of your tasks on any one of those days, you you either fail or you start over. And
Yeah.
so last year I actually failed halfway or didn't fail. I messed up halfway through and had to start all over. So it ended up taking me 60 days to go through my 40 days. But it literally, for some of the people that went through it, they've told me that it was almost a life-changing experience, because it's the first time that they've ever really put that much time and effort and attention on being that diligent about really anything for 40 days straight. And it seems like it can be kind of silly. It seems like such a little silly game to play with yourself, but really that's what discipline is. That's what mental
Yeah.
toughness is you overcoming those silly little things that you tell yourself when you don't want to do something, to be able to still get over it and do it. And that's what
Yeah.
the 40-day forge is all about. So if you guys are interested in doing that, go to 18strong.com/the forge. You'll hit the little button. It'll ask you for your email address, and then you'll get all the information. But know that we're going to start doing it. My goal is to have 1,000 or more golfers complete the forge in 2023. And our goal here is to just build a tougher brand of golfer. And that's
Yeah.
what 18 strong means to me. It's a mantra of, being as tough as you possibly can, being as resilient as you can, whether that be on the golf course, in the gym, or outside of either of those.
Yeah. And I'll link that down in the episode, the listen notes too. So I got a few questions that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast. One of them is, what are some books you recommend everyone read? I'm a big reader, and I like books, and I think people can learn a lot from them. So what are your recommendations?
Man, there's so many books. My I'll start with my favorite golf book that I've ever read, and
Hmm.
that is it's called The Match. I don't know if you've ever
Okay.
read that one.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's a great story about Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson, and them playing this great match out at Cypress Point. Um, and it was different than I expected it to be getting into it. My dad told me
Hmm.
about it, and it's just such a great story, because it tells the story of those guys and their careers, and this supposedly true tale of them playing to amateurs. And then it tells the story of how Pebble Beach was built, and just an
Right.
incredible book. Um, and then, man, I'm so into like the self development space, the mental game space,
Yeah.
and it's I've got all my books over here, or a bunch of books over here to the side, but there's so many to pick from. Um, one that had a huge impact on me years ago is the Compound Effect by Darren
Okay.
Hardy, which is a great one. And then I just saw this one on the shelf over here, Atomic Habits by James
Yeah.
Clear.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I could sit here and rattle off and talk books with you all day about those, but both of
Yeah.
those are so much about really some of the principles of what we were talking about with the Forge. Just, it's all about being diligent, knowing what you want, and then really pursuing it with dogged determination to go get it. So for all of you juniors listening to this, if your goal is to become a high level golfer, it's becoming really aware of what that looks like and really aware what it's going to take, and then figuring out what's the bigger reason behind why you want to do it, and then man, just go freaking after it.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this episode with me today. I feel like we talked about some really, really good stuff. Where can people find you on social media and find your podcast and things like that?
Yeah, easiest way is just look for 18 Strong, all one word, in on any platform, Instagram, Facebook. We don't really do Twitter. We're on there, but we don't really participate on there that much.
Yeah.
And then 18strong.com is our home base for everything. That's where we've got our programs, we've got the app, we've got some of our gear. But yeah, 18 Strong. And then on any of the podcast platforms, wherever you're listening to this show, you can probably just type in 18 Strong and find ours as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me today.
You got it, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Perfect Par podcast. You can find out more about my guest in this episode and where you can find them in the episode description. You can also find out more about me and shorter podcast clips on my Instagram at carter.stroup or my Twitter at Carter Stroup.